I'm Gabrielle, 23 years old, and I just got the worst birthday text from my dad. He sold my laptop without asking because my sister Sophia needed a new phone. The message ended with, "Be grateful we feed you." This was the laptop I worked 3 jobs to buy for my graphic design career. What followed next was a demand for $6,000 for her tuition by Friday. When I refused, he cut me off completely. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button as I share how I finally stood up for myself after years of being the family ATM. Growing up, I always felt the difference in how my parents treated me compared to my younger sister, Sophia. She was 4 years younger, and somehow everything she did was magical. When I brought home straight A's, my report card would get a quick glance and nod. When Sophia brought home C's and a couple of B's, there would be celebration dinners and praise about how hard she tried. I remember my 10th birthday when I asked for a specific art set. I had been eyeing it for months, dropping hints, even showing my parents the exact one online. When my birthday came, I received a generic set from the dollar store. 3 weeks later, for no special occasion, Sophia mentioned wanting to try painting, and the next day she had the exact art set I had asked for. These small inequalities built up over years. At first I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Sophia needed more attention. Maybe I was just more independent. But as time went on, the pattern became undeniable. When I was 14 and Sophia was 10, our parents divorced. It was messy and bitter. My father, Robert, quickly remarried a woman named Marissa, who came from money. She was nice enough to me at first, but it soon became clear that she viewed me as an obligation rather than a stepdaughter. Sophia, however, she doted on immediately. Taking her shopping, planning special outings, things I was apparently too old for, despite being a young teenager myself. My mother, Diana, took the divorce hard. She had been a stay-at-home mom for most of our childhood, and suddenly she was on her own. Instead of finding her independence, she seemed to transfer her dependency to me. By 16, I was working part-time jobs not just for my own expenses, but to help with bills my mother couldn't or wouldn't pay. Dad would send the required child support, but any time I needed something extra for school or activities, my mother would say, "Ask your father, he has all the money now." When I would ask him, the response was usually, "Your mother gets child support that should cover it." I existed in this financial no man's land where both parents assumed the other was covering my needs. Meanwhile, Sophia floated between both households with seemingly endless resources. Dad and Marissa spoiled her, while my mom used guilt to extract extra attention and gifts from our father for Sophia. Somehow, Sophia had become the emotional currency in their divorced relationship, while I was just expected to manage on my own. My academic achievements continued through high school. I graduated as valedictorian, earned a partial scholarship to college, and was accepted into a competitive graphic design program. My graduation gift from my father was a card with $50. A week later, Sophia got a new MacBook for passing 10th grade with a B average. I learned early that if I wanted something, I needed to work for it myself. By 18, I was juggling 3 jobs while maintaining my grades. My first priority was tuition that my scholarship didn't cover. My second was moving out of my mother's house, where I had essentially become both a roommate who paid half the bills and a personal therapist who endured hours of complaints about my father. The laptop that my father so casually sold was the result of a year of extra shifts and skipped lunches. As a graphic design student, I needed something powerful enough to run industry-standard software. I researched for months to find the best option within my budget, saved diligently, and finally purchased it 8 months ago. It wasn't just a computer. It was my livelihood, my future, my independence. This wasn't the first time my belongings mysteriously became Sophia's. My clothes would disappear from the laundry when I visited Dad's house. The wireless earbuds I got myself for Christmas somehow ended up in Sophia's room. A vintage camera I had restored was suddenly being used for Sophia's new photography phase. Each time I confronted these situations, the response was the same. Dad would say, "You're the older sister, you should want to help Sophia." Marissa would add, "You're so selfish, family shares with each other." My mother, despite her resentment of my father, would surprisingly take his side, telling me, "Don't make waves, we need to stay on their good side." And Sophia herself had grown from an innocently privileged child into a teenager who expected the world to accommodate her. She never asked to borrow things, she simply took them. She never seemed to consider that I had worked for these items or that they had value to me beyond their monetary worth. Over the years, I had learned to hide my most precious possessions, to keep my achievements quiet, to avoid jealousy, and to expect nothing in terms of support or celebration. I maintained a careful peace by giving in, by being the reasonable one, by swallowing my resentment. But with each incident, the weight of unfairness grew heavier, and my patience wore thinner. What none of them realized was that beneath my compliant exterior, I was keeping track. Every dollar I lent that was never repaid, every possession that was taken, every sacrifice I made while Sophia was indulged. I kept this account not out of pettiness, but as a private acknowledgement that I wasn't crazy, that the imbalance was real. Little did they know that the text message about my laptop would be the final entry in this uneven ledger, the last time I would silently absorb the cost of being the least favored child. I woke up on my birthday with modest expectations. 23 isn't exactly a milestone, and based on past experience, I knew better than to anticipate much celebration. My roommate had left for work, but had placed a cupcake and a small wrapped gift on the kitchen counter. That simple gesture already made the day special. I had taken the day off from both my classes and my part-time job at the campus design lab. My plan was to sleep in, maybe treat myself to lunch somewhere nice, and work on a freelance project that actually excited me. It was going to be a quiet day of small personal indulgences. The text from my father arrived at 10:22 a.m. "Happy birthday. Sold your laptop yesterday. Sophia needs a new phone, hers broke. She has important school stuff. Got good price. Be grateful we feed you when you visit." I stared at the message, certain I had misunderstood. He couldn't possibly mean my design laptop, the one that was in my room at my mother's house where I still kept some things. The one that contained all my projects, my portfolio, my freelance work, the one I was planning to use later today. I called him immediately. "Hello," he answered, sounding annoyed that I had called rather than texted back. "Dad, what do you mean you sold my laptop?" I tried to keep my voice steady. Exactly what I said. Sophia broke her phone, needs a new one for school projects, and staying in touch with her friends. Your laptop was just sitting in your room collecting dust. I use that laptop every day when I'm there, I said. It has all my design work on it. I need it for school and my job. Did you at least back up my files? His laugh was dismissive. You're always so dramatic. You have that computer at the university you can use. Sophia needs this now. Family helps family. That lab computer isn't mine. I can only use it during work hours, I explained, though I knew it was futile. And all my files, my projects, you should keep that stuff on those cloud things. Anyway, it's done now. Before I could respond, my phone pinged with another text from him. Also, you'll pay her tuition, $6,000 by Friday. The spring payment is due. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. $6,000. By Friday. That was all the money I had saved from my jobs intended to cover my own final tuition installment and living expenses for the next 2 months. Dad, I said into the phone, I don't have that kind of money to give away. I need it for my own tuition. His voice hardened. Your sister's education is important. You're working. You have that design job now. You can make more. We've supported you for years. This was a stunning revision of history. I had been financially independent since I was 18, taking loans for what my partial scholarship didn't cover, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Meanwhile, they had fully funded Sophia's private high school, her shopping sprees, her expensive hobbies that changed monthly. I can't, I said, finally finding my voice. That's my tuition money and rent. I worked for that. No chance. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was cold. Then get out. You're cut off. Don't bother coming by the house again. When you're ready to help your family, we can talk. The line went dead. Moments later, another text. You have until tomorrow to get your stuff from your mother's. Anything left behind we'll assume you don't want. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, trembling with a mixture of shock, anger, and an odd sense of clarity. Cut off from what exactly financial support they had never provided. Emotional support that had always been conditional. A family that saw me as an ATM rather than a daughter. I went to my mother's house immediately, half expecting my father to be bluffing. But when I arrived and went to my room, the laptop was indeed gone. So was my external hard drive that had contained my backups. My carefully organized desk had been rummaged through drawers left open as if someone had been searching for anything else of value. I called my mother, who was at work. Did you know Dad took my laptop? I asked when she answered. She sighed, that familiar sound of exasperation that suggested I was creating problems. He said Sophia needed it for school and you weren't using it, she said. You know how he gets when it's about her. I couldn't exactly stop him. Mom that had all my work on it, I said. And now he's demanding $6,000 by Friday for her tuition. "Well, you are working at that firm now," she replied, surprising me with her alignment with my father, despite their usual animosity. "Family helps family, Gabrielle. Your sister needs an education, too. So do I, Mom. That money is for my tuition. You'll figure it out, you always do," she said dismissively. "Listen, I have to go. We'll talk later." As I hung up, I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. For years I had accepted their treatment as normal, had believed that being a good daughter meant giving until it hurt. I had been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who would always come through while expecting nothing in return. But standing in my partially emptied room, looking at the vacant spot where my laptop should be, I felt something new and powerful rising within me. I was done. Done being the family's safety net. Done being taken for granted. Done sacrificing my needs for people who wouldn't even consider mine. If I was cut off, so be it. It was time to cut them off too. The decision to leave permanently, rather than temporarily, crystallized in my mind with surprising clarity. This wasn't a tantrum or an emotional reaction. It was the long overdue recognition that I deserved better. The question now was how to execute this exit in a way that protected me while making it absolutely clear that this time was different. This time, I wouldn't be coming back with my tail between my legs, ready to resume my role as the family doormat. My first call was to Jamie, my closest friend since freshman year of college. She had witnessed the family dynamic firsthand and had been telling me for years that it wasn't normal or healthy. When I explained what had happened, she didn't hesitate. "My couch is yours for as long as you need it," she said. "And before you argue, yes, I'm sure, and no, it's not an imposition. Come tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." With a safe landing place secured, I turned my attention to the practical matters of severing ties with my family. I started with the most important documents, collecting my birth certificate, social security card, passport, and medical records from the lockbox I kept in my closet. These at least they hadn't taken. Next, I gathered my financial documents, bank statements, student loan information, scholarship paperwork. As I reviewed my recent bank statements, I noticed something disturbing. There had been several small withdrawals that I didn't recognize, ranging from $20 to $100, all from ATMs near my parents' homes. With a sick feeling, I realized they must have accessed my account somehow. I remembered then that I had opened my first bank account as a teenager, with my father as a joint account holder. Although I had opened a new account when I started college, I had kept the old one active and occasionally deposited money there as an emergency fund. Apparently, my emergency had been funding Sophia's coffee runs and my father's gas station stops. This discovery added urgency to my plan. I drove straight to the bank and explained the situation to the manager. By the end of an hour, I had closed the compromised account, opened an entirely new one at a different bank, set up two-factor authentication, and placed alerts on my credit report. The manager, seeing my distress, also helped me review my credit history on the spot. What we found sent a chill down my spine. There was a credit card in my name that I had never applied for. It had a $5,000 limit and was currently carrying a balance of $4,800. The address listed was my father's house. The security question answers would have been known to my family: my mother's maiden name, my first pet, the street where I grew up. "Identity theft," the manager said gravely. "And because it's family, it gets complicated. But we can dispute these charges and report the fraud." I asked for printed copies of everything, adding them to the growing folder of evidence I was compiling. By the time I left the bank, I felt both violated and oddly empowered. Each discovery was another thread cut in the unhealthy ties that had bound me to my family's exploitation. My next stop was my workplace, a small but growing design firm where I had started as an intern and recently been hired part-time with the promise of full-time work after graduation. My supervisor, Teresa, had always been supportive of my work and understanding of my complex schedule as I balanced school and multiple jobs. I explained the situation as professionally as I could, focusing on the practical aspects. My laptop with work projects had been sold. Without my knowledge, I was temporarily displaced from my housing, and I would need some flexibility in the coming weeks as I secured a new living situation. Teresa's reaction surprised me. Instead of the reluctant accommodation I expected, she was outraged on my behalf. "This is completely unacceptable," she said firmly. "Let me see what we can do about getting you a computer to use in the meantime. As for your living situation, take the time you need and we can arrange for you to work remotely as much as possible until things settle down." Her support brought unexpected tears to my eyes, a brief crack in the determined composure I had been maintaining. It was a stark reminder of how foreign basic respect and consideration had become in my family relationships. Back at my mother's house, I continued my methodical preparation. I collected my clothing, focusing on professional attire and necessities, rather than trying to take everything. I gathered the few sentimental items that mattered to me, photos from college, artwork, from friends, books that had sustained me through difficult times. As I worked, I also compiled a detailed accounting of the financial support I had provided to my family over the years. Bank transfers to my mother for rent, utilities, and groceries when she claimed to be short. Cash given to Sophia for school trips and activities that my father had promised to reimburse, but never did. The cost of the laptop and other items that had mysteriously become Sophia's possessions. The total was staggering, over $23,000 since I had turned 18. $23,000 that I had worked multiple jobs to earn while carrying a full course load. $23,000 that could have gone toward my own education, my own living expenses, my own future. The fraudulent credit card was the final straw. I drafted a formal letter detailing the financial exploitation and identity theft, citing specific amounts, dates, and including copies of documentation. I stated clearly that I expected full repayment of the fraudulent credit card charges within 30 days, or I would file a police report for identity theft. This was no empty threat. I had spoken with an officer at the campus police department that afternoon, exploring my options without filing a formal report yet. He had been clear, family or not, identity theft was a serious crime with significant consequences. As night fell, I made one final discovery while searching for my tax documents. Hidden in the back of my desk drawer was a statement for a second credit card in my name that I hadn't applied for, this one maxed out at $3,500. The purchases listed included restaurant meals, gas stations, clothing stores, and gaming subscriptions, expenses that aligned perfectly with my father and Sophia's spending habits. I added this to my growing file of evidence, a folder that now contained irrefutable proof of years of financial abuse. This would be what I left behind, my final communication to a family that had treated me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. By midnight, my preparations were complete. I had packed what mattered, secured my finances, documented the abuse, and lined up temporary housing and work arrangements. I was exhausted but resolute, running on a clarity of purpose that cut through the emotional chaos. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first, and despite the uncertainty ahead, it felt absolutely right. With my bags packed and loaded into my car, I took one final look around the bedroom that had been mine, but never really felt like home. The walls were still adorned with a few photos. I was leaving behind the bed was made with the same blue comforter I'd had since high school, and the bookshelf stood half empty now that I'd taken my favorite volumes. It was strange how a space could hold so many memories, yet feel so detached from who I'd become. I moved through the quiet house with deliberate calm, knowing my mother wouldn't be home for several hours. She worked night shifts as a nurse now, another reason why we rarely saw each other despite living under the same roof. The distance between us had grown so gradually that I hardly noticed when we stopped having real conversations and started just exchanging logistical information about bills and schedules. As I descended the stairs, I heard a key in the front door. My heart jumped, but I steeled myself. It was Sophia returning from whatever social engagement had occupied her evening. She looked surprised to see me standing there with my jacket on and car keys in hand. "Gabrielle, what are you doing here so late?" she asked, tossing her designer purse onto the entryway table. The purse, I couldn't help noticing, looked new and expensive. "Just picking up some things," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. She nodded absently, already checking her phone, her attention barely skimming the surface of our interaction. This was typical Sophia, self-absorbed, oblivious to anyone else's reality. "Did you see Dad today?" she asked, suddenly glancing up. "He said he took care of your laptop situation." The casual way she referenced the theft of my property nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. My laptop situation, as if my primary tool for education and livelihood was just a minor inconvenience to be handled. "Yes, I saw the empty space on my desk," I said, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. Sophia finally seemed to notice something was off. She looked at me more carefully, taking in my jacket, my keys, the resolved expression on my face.